I'll just quickly mention one or two things about myself. And thank you, Marlene, for the introduction. I currently work as the head of customer experience at Absa Bank. I also serve as a trustee of Unthinkable Kenya. You can check it out on unthinkable.co.ke. It's a leadership community. I'm a design thinking practitioner. I've been at it I'm in my 6th year now. So I can say with a fair degree of confidence that I understand it at a practical level. I have seen its power in not just transforming experiences, but also generating profit, which is ultimately what you want to achieve if you do this in business. And so my goal here today is maybe hopefully through an exchange to help you appreciate what I have come to appreciate over this many years as far as design thinking is concerned. I can see they're beginning to come in. Please keep them coming. Eric says to learn design thinking. Elvi says best practices in designing solutions for clients and customers. Marlene says understand what design thinking is and how it can be incorporated in product development. I will allow another 15 seconds or so just so that your objective here is met. Please post for me on the chat what your expectations are from this discussion. Marlene, I hope I have the ability to share my screen.
Yes, you do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll work with this for now. If anybody else has anything you'd like to add to what has already been posted, please do so. Do not feel held back. The last thing you want to know about me is that I am a conversationalist, which means that I will not be pontificating to you. I would like us to converse because research proves that conversational learning is much more effective than one-directional learning. And so expect questions, expect me to request for you to unmute and share with me. And that's how we're going to make this hour as effective as possible. So please read what is on the screen. And I just wanted to take a moment to try and really understand what this gentleman, Russell Ackoff, is saying. He's one of the forefathers of system design. We fail more often because we solve the wrong problem than because we get a solution to the right problem. And I just need one person who is philosophical enough to just tell me what is your immediate understanding of this. No right, no wrong answer. Just anyone can unmute and just let me know. What does this quote communicate to you? Amos says we fail because we solve the problem in the wrong way. Thank you for that. And of course, if you're unable to unmute and speak, you can always use the chat function.
I could probably give it a go.
Yes, Boniface, go for it.
So I think what the statement tries to tell us is that we try maybe to approach a problem. We try giving a solution to a problem we do not understand. Yeah.
Okay. Marlene says it is important to understand the problem first before finding the solution for it. Thank you for that. That's also very well put. I'm starting with this and taking some time with it because design thinking, and I'm sure, given the spaces that I know most of you are in, you've probably interacted with it in one shape or form. At the core of it, it's about problem discovery. It's about understanding the core of the core of the core of what is driving behavior, or what is creating pain points, or what is causing certain gaps in whichever space that you are in. And unfortunately, if you do not start from the premise of being very sure that you're solving for the right problem, then it doesn't matter what you do thereafter. You guys have probably had the concept of white elephants, not concept, it's like government projects that have been done, and then next thing they are dead, and all these billions that were poured into it are just they're sitting. They're all over the country. If you move around this country, you will see many of them. And what are white elephants? White elephants essentially are either really great institutions or infrastructure that was put in place with a vision, and either got mismanaged and hence failed, or basically became redundant, right? And nobody was using it anymore. I think you might remember the joke around when SGR came and everyone was asking, so what happens to the other rail that was in existence at the time? What happens then? And there was this big debate of, should we be building a whole new rail, or should we be thinking about how we can reuse the rail that we have and actually make it work for us? Those are the kind of debates that you'll have. If you work in an organization, this could take the form of a product that has been put in the market. Thereafter, the uptake is not as good as it was supposed to be. I work in the banking industry. The banking industry is full of solutions that nobody's, right? Question right now, how many banking products do you know? Your list will not be more than one, the fingers in one hand. But believe different types of banking products in the market, right? My own employer, I think, has like 130 plus. So then you ask yourself, how come you have 130 plus products, but the customers, the people you are solving for, only know 5 at most, or only need 5 at most at any one time? And that is at the heart of what this whole concept is about. So keep that in mind as we move forward, because I will only be able to touch on the principles of design thinking today. But towards the end, I'll also give you some links to some resources that you can use to just enhance your knowledge of design thinking. Now, let me move to the next slide. And this is the other point I wanted to share with you all today. When you hear the word designer, most people will resort to thinking about somebody who does graphics. And if any of you is a graphics designer here, then that's probably where your mind goes. Somewhere in the 50s, engineers, this was a field of engineering, mainly in the US and in Europe, there was a sort of like a trend that was beginning to come up, where engineers were beginning to feel that the problems that they were solving for as the Industrial Revolution was happening at the time no longer required only thinking in the form of logic, right? And mathematical equations and all that kind of stuff. They realized that now the market and the ecosystem that they're operating in also required them to think about the usability of what they were designing. So radios, for instance, were no longer just gadgets that could produce sound. They needed to sound a certain way. They needed to be able to be operated in a certain way. They needed to be able to allow me to play around with different stations and things like that, right? Even construction of buildings. It was no longer just about, putting up a building. Not only did it need to be aesthetically pleasing, all of a sudden you start having conversations around things like, how do you make it have natural light so that then you don't have to always have your lights on? How do you make it more green? Cars are another great example. The beginning of the 1900s, when Ford and the likes were producing cars, all cars looked the same. But then you start having all these developments and technological advancements, and all of a sudden it's no longer just about engineering pieces together. And the meaning of the word design changed, right? It stopped being about aesthetics. So aesthetics, functionality, experience, and of course the technical aspects needed to come together to create what has come to be known as meaningful order. All right. So it's no longer just about what a solution does, it's also about how it does it. And now I can tell you as a practitioner in the field of customer experience, now it's even going beyond just how it functions, it's now going towards how it makes me feel as I interact with it. And so the expectations of people who are consuming solutions and products are truly, truly shifting. So the word design thinking came out of that revolution, if I could call it that, that happened. A very good example, and I'll share a video with you guys shortly, is the MacBook, right? By the time the MacBook was coming into the picture in the 80s, computers were very technical, very functional, very massive things that could only be afforded by corporates, right? Then came the revolution of the personal computer. But the people who were bringing the personal computer to people's houses were the same people who had been designing those massive things that used to occupy a whole room, right? And it wasn't making sense. It was too expensive. It was too clunky. It could only be utilized by computer engineers. The average Joe could not make sense of a computer. But guess what? They needed the computer for them to be more effective in what they were doing. And what Apple was able to do, and ushering in what is now known as the PC revolution, is they managed to make not just the what the computer does, but they fixed the how the computer does it, introducing the likes of the mouse that would make it so much easier for me as a user to make use of this particular solution. And what has happened? Today, PCs are as ubiquitous as everything. And then the mobile phone came, and you guys know the story. So design and thinking is essentially, it's like you're taking the brain and you're taking the heart and you're putting them together into play. What does that mean for the people I'm speaking to here? And based on the little I know about you guys, is that you're engineers, you're programmers, you're coders, you're playing quite a bit in the tech space. If you're going to be successful as providers of technology solutions, it will require that you go outside the code and spend time appreciating the person for whom you are creating the code. And if you've already been in sessions with Sam Kamochu, who's the CEO at Meliora, he is a technologist who actually has understood this particular concept, because having been a programmer all these years, now when you hear him talk, he's no longer just talking about the code and what the code can do. It is the who are you doing this for and why do they need it? That's design thinking, all right? It is industry agnostic. It transcends any industry. Today, it is being utilized everywhere, right? It transcends industries. It transcends skill sets. Everybody from a scientist to a hotelier to an artist to an interior designer. Each of them has to be able to practice design thinking if they're going to create solutions that create meaningful order in the spaces that they operate in. So I just want you to take that home with you, that all of us are designers. Why? Because all of us are created to solve problems. Once you embrace that premise of being a problem solver, who is supposed to be very closely connected to the person who is doing everything else starts falling into place. The thinking starts coming into place, and that's essentially what is design thinking. I want to play a video for you. I hope it will function, and then we're gonna have a quick chat around it before I just now shift over to the principles of design thinking. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to keep posting on the chat, and I will be picking them up from there. Okay, just allow me one moment. All right. So I'm going to play a video here for you. It basically tries to dig a little bit deeper into what I've just explained, but in, I would say, more deeper terms. Norman is a professor. He's a design thinking practitioner. He has done a lot of work in this space, and he tries to really bring it all together in this 2-minute video. And so just watch it, and as you're listening to it, please take note on your pad or on your paper, one thing that is jumping out at you from what he is saying, and then we will talk about it afterwards. Okay.
Principles of human-centered design apply even if you don't follow the process of human-centered design, because what are the principles? Well, the first one is be human-centered. Focus upon the people that whatever you're doing is intended for, whether you're doing a service or a product or an organizational structure or a new way of, I don't know, stocking the warehouse or putting things on shelves, whatever you're doing, always think of the people and all the people, not just the people, say, who are going to retrieve the items you put in, but the people who have to put the items up there in the first place. And if you're in the healthcare system, you have to think about patients and their families and the physicians and the nurses and also the medical personnel and the technicians. And for that matter, even the people who do the scheduling and clean the place. You have to think of it as a system and look at all of the components. That's the second important thing. Find the right problem. Almost always when somebody gives me a problem to solve, I refuse to solve it because it's not the right problem. It's the symptom of the problem. And I want to solve the fundamental basic problem, because if I can solve the basic problem, guess what? The symptoms disappear. But that's not always so easy, and it can take a lot of time. And even though I argue strongly, you should always try to solve the fundamental root problem, sometimes it's okay just to solve the symptoms. And finally, you have to think of everything as a system. Everything is interconnected. So if you solve this tiny little piece, well, that's kind of nice, but sometimes optimizing each of the small pieces gives an inferior result. Optimization of the local does not mean global optimization. And so we should always be thinking of the big picture. What is the final result we care about? And user experience isn't always the most important component. Because take a camera. What's the camera about? All those controls? No. The camera is just a tool to get the real user experience, which is the experience of enjoying the movie, the video, the picture. It's the end result that matters. And so we should be focused upon making it easier for people to get to the end result. We don't have to focus on the details of the tools. Those have to be understandable and usable. But remember, the important thing is the real goal of the people who use our products.
Okay, I hope you are able to pick up the video. Sorry, Marlene, if you could please confirm that for me.
Yes, we have.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. So because we are tight for time, I'm going to request that we use the chat much more. So I'm putting out the question now is, what is the one thing you're picking out from that video? And of course, connecting to the intro that I made. Let me see 1 or 2 comments as we move forward. Steve says human-centric. Steve, are you able to unmute and just let me know a little bit more of what that meant to you? It says design with the user in mind. It's great. Bernard says finding the right problem to solve. Agreed. Any others? Eric says user-centered design. So Eric, the question for you now would be, so if somebody was to ask you now, what is user-centered design? What would be your simple answer to that be? And you'll notice that he used the word human-centered design, which is a more progressive word that was introduced a few years back. It was still within the realm of design thinking, but to really bring out that aspect of the human side of things. Every single thing that you will produce will be consumed by a human being, ultimately, in one shape or form. And so that's why human became an important piece of it. Okay, so as we get deep into that, so I want you to think about any problem that you're currently dealing with, or something that you're trying to solve for. It could be an app that you're trying to build. It could be that you work in an organization and you're involved with solving for a particular aspect of the value chain in delivering the solution. It could be as basic a problem as you're just trying to think about how to redesign your house, or organize your desk drawer. As I said earlier, design thinking can be applied in any sphere of life. So I want you to think about a problem, a real life problem. Okay. Now, as I go through the 6 principles that I will share, and it's important to mention that these principles take different shapes and forms depending on which source of information you're consuming. So understand the principle. You don't have to remember the technical words and everything behind it. So I want you to go through it with that in mind. Don already spoke to a couple of this. So this is the mindset that you're supposed to acquire. Number 1 is holistic approach. Okay, holistic approach. You all know how frustrating it is when, for instance, you're trying to, and I know I use the government as an example a lot, it's because I think there's a lot of problems there that need to be fixed through design thinking. But you know how frustrating it is when you're trying to get a government service and you go to this one office, even if it's just getting your driver's license or you're trying to renew your passport or whatever it is, and you go to this one person, it tells you need this and this and this and this. You get that, you come, you submit, you finish, you think you're done. When you go to the next person, they tell you, oh no, you also need this. But then you're like, no, but in the other place, they told me this. You're like, no, you also need this. So you go back, then again, you're looking for it. 4 or 5 departments in, you are utterly frustrated because you're like, I'm just trying to get my passport, or I'm just trying to renew my business license. Why is it becoming so frustrating? Okay. The reason that happens is when people are designing a process or a policy or a solution that does not factor in the holistic approach, meaning that what you do here will affect something else and affect something else and affect something else. One of the things we challenge ourselves at ABSA, for instance, when we're coming up with any solution, is we have to ask that question of which other systems will be affected by the change that we are about to implement. And if we can identify them, we then invite stakeholders from those spaces to come and tell them, this is what we are about to do, and we think it will affect your systems in this way. And then we end up designing something that factors in all those aspects into place. So you want to create something that will be successful. It needs to be holistic. It needs to be able to factor in all the moving parts. A good example nowadays is where phones are designed, and there's the aspect of interoperability. You want to be able to connect it to your computer. You want to be able to move files to another machine. You want to be able to use the charger that you were using for your previous machine, your previous phone. Sorry, you want to be able to use it on this new phone, and it can be very useless to have invested in a device in the past, and then when you upgrade it to a new device, the old device is no longer usable. That's what holistic approach is all about. Now, for the problem statement that you are currently thinking about, what other systems does it affect, or what other systems affect it, right? And keep in mind that systems don't necessarily have to be technical systems. It could also just be other processes. It could be other people who are affected by that. All right. Now, once you start thinking holistically, radical collaboration comes in. Because the only way you're going to deliver that holistic solution is if you're able to collaborate with others. A friend of mine likes to say that life is not finite, right? Meaning that somewhere along the way, something will happen that will require you to take a bit of a detour and another detour and another detour, and you cannot solve everything alone. So design thinkers are big and massive on collaboration because they understand the importance of things being able to interlock. Keep that in mind. All right, let me move on to the next one, which we call reframing. The premise of this looks like this. There is nothing you will think about today that somebody else has not thought about before. When we go through the design thinking process, there's something we normally call divergence and convergence. Divergence essentially basically is a step, and I'll share that shortly at the very beginning, where we say, before you narrow down to this is a problem I'm trying to solve, remember the premise of design thinking earlier is about getting the right problem. Before you narrow down to the problem, find out what else has been done in the past towards fixing the same problem. All right. Understand the previous perspectives, because only by understanding those perspectives are you able to come up with new perspectives around the same things, because you're solving a problem that somebody else has probably already tried to solve. And this is normally an issue that especially tech innovators and entrepreneurs face, where you're going to go take something that you have seen maybe working in the West, and you come and you just plaster it here and put a local branding, and you are trying to put it into the market. We've seen that with a lot of the solutions that we are all consuming at the moment. The risk you're facing with that is if you're not reframing the problem to your local context, then you end up with a copy-paste product that may make sense in the US, but does not make sense here. Not because it is the wrong solution, but because it is the wrong solution, it is the right solution to the wrong problem. It worked for the problem that they have in the US. It doesn't work for the problem that we have here. You're going to have to find a new perspective that speaks to the problem of the local reality that you are dealing with. That's what reframing is. And this one is a critical one for anyone trying to build solutions for any sort of market. Okay. I'll move on to curious optimism. And this you will see when we're talking about ideation. In design thinking, there is no dumb idea. In fact, the dirtier, the wilder, the crazier, the unconventional it sounds, the better. Because we believe that only in the unexplored areas will you find truly aha or light bulb moments. What does that mean? It means that during the design thinking process, you're supposed to be like a sponge. If you're working with a team, everyone in that team needs to be throwing in their ideas into the pool. The other thing that we try to do with design thinking is what we call analogous situations. What does that mean? It means that if you are trying to solve something, say, in the food industry, you might find that there is something they are doing in the automotive industry that, if applied in the food industry, could actually be very transformative. Not that it's new, not that it's anything, it's just that it was being applied in an analogous situation, but then you brought it here and something changed, right? We have solutions, for instance, at Amstel that we have deployed in terms of how we engineer products that have been borrowed from the automotive industry, just by way of an example. And why? Because one of the things that the automotive industry does very well is, so the technical word they use for them is quality circles, where they have somebody who is constantly observing the assembly line. And if they notice even a small inflection in the accuracy or in the timing that's supposed to happen, they actually obsess over that one piece of space of the process and understand what is it that happened that made this thing jump by 1 second. That's how they're able to churn out millions of cars every year, right? From these manufacturing farms. We brought that into Bangkok, and we said, let's, for instance, follow the journey of how a credit card is processed from the moment somebody applies for the credit card all the way to the moment they get it, and understand where are the spaces where the pain points appear that leads to a delayed credit card, that leads to a spoiled credit card at the end, all those things. And it's helping us find this sort of, they're almost like micro moments in the process that when tweaked, you feel a huge difference at the end. Optimism requires that, and the curiosity behind it is that you have to always be looking out for a solution. You're always looking out for new ways of doing the same thing that you have been doing. All right, bias towards action. Put in the simplest of terms, design thinking is about learning by doing, or learning while doing. We love failure because with every failure, there is a lesson, right? There is no brilliant solution in the market that was not a product of failure. Every single one of the products that we enjoy today, even where you're sitting at your desk, was a product of failure. What is impressive about design thinking, and I think one of my most favorite things about it, is it allows you to fail, but still be able to keep going. Because with the concept of prototyping and testing, it means you're failing in very controlled environments, right? Any of you in technology understands the value of prototyping and testing something before putting it out. Testing with a small market, usability testing, you understand all that. We spend less time coming up with documents and trying to build, I don't know, business cases and more time just putting out products and hearing what people have to say about it. Last but not least, and Don spoke about this as well, mindfulness of the process. The tradition, this is the thinking side of things, the traditional steps that need to still be followed for you to get to success. Design thinking does not mean you skip those steps. Design thinking simply asks you to bring in the human element into the process, understand who you're doing it for, what their definition of a great experience is, right? And the only way you get to do that, because most of the time people don't even know what they want, is through testing and testing and testing and observing. I'm going to take a pause there before I show you another video that just will try and extrapolate this a little bit more. If there's any question or comment, please feel free to put it in the chat. As we proceed, we have very few minutes left. Okay, so you've heard me talk about MacBook a bit, and then Apple and the rest of them. They are a big case study in the design thinking space, mainly because one of the companies that helps them in the very early stages is a company that has become easily the biggest design thinking firm in the world. They're called IDEO. And so this is a story of how IDEO went from solving for a device such as the mouse to solving for very big problem statements across the world. And I want you to use this video to extrapolate for you how dynamic, how diverse, and how scalable the concept of design thinking is. Once again, please take notes of what you can and post for me on the comments the aha moments that have come out for you as you're watching the video, and then we will move to the actual process. Thank you. There it is.
This is the first Apple computer mouse. It came with Apple's $10,000 Lisa computer, and it was designed by a product design consulting firm that would eventually become known as IDEO. The assignment was straightforward. They had to take the computer mouse, a $400 device at the time, and bring it down to under $35, make it mass producible and reliable. And above all, it needed to be simple.
We control Lisa by pointing to these images on the screen with this unique item called a mouse.
Fast forward about 30 years, and IDEO doesn't really create products anymore. They transitioned to designing networks and experiences, things like Los Angeles's voting system and the Red Cross's method for finding donors, even entire schools. So what does making a computer mouse have to do with creating a school system from scratch? It turns out, quite a lot.
The world we live in is one where really the complex things are the things that are mostly broken, not the simple things. We have lots of great products, lots of beautiful products, lots of products we can use every day. Everything from furniture to tableware to consumer electronics. They're mostly pretty good, right? And yes, there's opportunity to do better and do more, but I'm interested in the things that don't work very well and the things that you can impact society with, and they're mostly the more complex things.
Back in 1971, a designer named Victor Papanek wrote a book called Design for the Real World. The premise was pretty simple. Creators could take some of the same design strategies from the creation of industrial products and use them to tackle problems like pollution and overcrowding and food shortages. By 2001, IDEO had done just that, pivoting from products to real-world experiences. But the design steps? Tim Brown says they say just about the same.
The first piece is observing the world in order to ask an interesting question, right? I mean, and you can observe the world in lots of different ways. When we talk about human-centered design, we're really talking about observing the way humans live their lives and asking interesting questions about, hey, why does somebody do this and not that? Or why is somebody struggling with this problem? Why is it hard for somebody to open that, why are they struggling to open that jam jar lid? Well, so maybe I could redesign the jam jar lid, right? Or maybe I could give them a tool to help them, right? So why is this happening? So the first step is that looking at the world and coming up with good questions.
For making a mouse, that means watching how people use computers and observing what they want and what they don't. For designing a school, that meant spending a month in Peru, meeting with students and parents, teachers, investors, government and business leaders to address needs like academic planning, modular classroom space, accessible technology, and affordable tuition.
The next step is taking all the insights you have about those questions and starting to imagine ideas like, here's what I could do, here's what I might imagine doing better or differently. So that's what we often call ideation or idea making.
Then comes the fun part. You test it out.
Right at the beginning of the process, it might be a really simple cardboard model or a quick sketch, or if it's digital, it might be a quick digital simulation or something. And you try it out with people.
Sometimes those drafts can be pretty rough. The first prototype for the mouse was a roll-on deodorant stick and a butter dish from a Palo Alto Walgreens.
And you test it and see, and it doesn't work. Okay, so I need to rethink my idea, and I do it again, right? And this is where the iteration comes in. Like you learn from the prototype, you realize what's not working, or maybe it's a crummy idea, you have to go back and find a new idea again. And you go through that loop over and over again, asking the question, having ideas, prototyping, learning, until you get to something that truly meets somebody's needs or a set of people's needs. Now, the last bit of the process, which arguably happens in that iteration also, is the storytelling piece, right? Because always you're trying to explain to people why your idea is interesting.
Macintosh, the computer for the rest of us.
I think what you need to design a complex system is not one brain, you need lots of brains. You need lots of brains with different perspectives, different creative contributions that they make, working together to get to an outcome that is literally rich enough and sophisticated enough to be able to behave like a system instead of being like an object.
All right, let me see. We had Elvis said he wanted to understand best practices. but I can't see him in the chat. Marlene, let me go with you. You had said you wanted to understand what design thinking is and how it can be incorporated in product development.
Yeah.
How do you feel now about based on what we've discussed so far?
From the discussions, I think I have a better understanding of what design thinking is and how it has been incorporated into product development, especially the example of Macintosh. So yeah.
Okay. All right. So with the 3 minutes that we have, I'm going to now just show you now the final part of this conversation, which is essentially what goes on in the actual process. And that has already been alluded to a little bit by Tim Brown. So I'll just be reiterating 1 or 2 things of what he has said. So he talked about 4 steps in the process. Again, as you consume different types of information about design thinking, you will see different words being used and the steps being tweaked around in one way or the other, but it still comes down to these 4 steps. He talked about observe people so that you can ask the right questions. That is most commonly known as empathy. You have to empathize, right? You normally have 2 ways that you empathize. One is observation, which basically means just go out into the real world and look at how people are interacting with other solutions similar to what you're trying to create. And you get to know enough to ask the right questions, and the right questions are asked in the context of an interview. So we talk about empathy interviews, right? The empathy process of design thinking is very different from what traditional focus group type conversations look like. One of the key things about empathy interviews is that they are one-on-one, right? And you only need to do up to 5 of them for any one problem that you're trying to solve. And scientifically, it has been shown that you get enough insights to be able to move on to defining what the core of the problem is. Remember what we started off with, we say design thinking is about finding the right problem, because once you find the right problem, then now you can easily go on to the making the right thing, which is the ideation that he alluded to. Ideation is not about perfection. It's not about getting it right the first time. It's about trying and trying and trying and trying again until you have that aha moment. And the way you find that aha moment is by prototyping. So in technology, some of you might know the word low fidelity prototypes. Basically, that's just a fancy way of saying rudimentary prototypes. The most you heard what I was saying. So they use for the mouse, to test the mouse, they took a cardboard box and they put a roll-on ball underneath it for them to be able to test it out. It's normally as simple as that. When we build apps at AppSal, we actually literally draw the interface of the app on a piece of paper, on several pieces of paper. And then when we're doing the user testing, we are asking the customer, okay, so tap here, they tap the piece of paper. When they tap it on the piece of paper, we move that paper, we bring the next paper that shows the next screen. That is something you can literally do in an hour, test within the next hour. And by the 3rd hour, you already have some answers on things you need to tweak on your UX before you finally get to the final solution. That's the beauty of the design thinking process. And that's what I want to leave you with in terms of the steps. For those who would like to get a little bit deeper into the world of design thinking, I want to share with you 2 resources that have proven to be very helpful for me in my journey. One is, and you can take note of this URL on your end. One is designkit.org. It's actually done by IDEO, and basically they have case studies here. They've got different toolkits that you can download and apply. If you go to the methods section, they have tons and tons of things that you can use at different stages of the process. So inspiration, ideation, implementation, etc. And you can find all of them here. So designkit.org. And the other tool I will leave, this was literally what introduced me to the world of design thinking. It is Google, a team of guys at Google came up with a 5-day process of solving any problem from day 1 to day 5. And they basically took the design thinking process and broke it down into these 5 days. And they give, every single day, they give you the tools, the activities, everything that you do up until you get to the last day. I encourage you to check it out, use it. They also have a book that you can buy to learn a little bit more about this. And I assure you, you'll be on your way to being many, many steps ahead of your compatriots who are trying to become a great solution provider. Great. I will stop there, Marlene, and hand back to you. Should there be any questions, comments, happy to take them.
As we wait for the questions, thank you so much for the presentation, Alex. I have learned quite a bit about design thinking and how we can incorporate the user in product development. So I'm sure the audience has learned something too. And as we do the hackathon projects for the Natujenge Bootcamp, it can be at the center of the product design and development process.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I don't think there's anyone with a question, so we will close the session here. Thank you so much for this session, and I'm hoping that we could invite you for another session in future to maybe discuss more about design thinking and what it really is about, and for those who want to get into the field, what it takes to get to where you are. And also help us with applications to Stanford, yeah? Yeah, thank you so much.
For sure. All right. Thank you all. God bless you, and have a great evening ahead, and all the best with the bootcamp and the hackathon.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you guys, and see you around. Bye.